got Mary Anderson, who's the testing coordinator at PPS, and Gwen Sullivan, who is the president for the Portland Association of Teachers. And so we're going to have both of them present their views and representations, and then we'll open it up to questions after both of them have a chance.
What was your name again?
Give their space. So we're going to start with Mary from the district.
All right.
So, good evening. Thank you for coming. I'm really happy to be here. So my name is Mary Anderson. I'm the new district testing coordinator. That's my role. But before I start talking at you, because I've got, I apologize, I'm going to be talking at you for a little bit, and then we'll open questions, and Gwen will speak as well. But before I do, just so you have some sense of who's talking at you. I started teaching junior high, Urban Middle School, 7th grade world history, and then I spent 3 glorious years I was asked to then move into the high school level and open an AP class, and I could not turn that down. From there, I was actually recruited from my previous district to move to research, evaluation assessment, to work with assessment and assessment literacy, and so I come to you with that background. I'm very much coming from a teacher point of view. Actually, Gwen and I spent some time together today, and at an assessment meeting. And so when I'm speaking to you tonight, and any of the parent meetings, I just want you to know that I just wanted, my goal, my intention is to share with you the information as I have it as the district test coordinator, so that you can make your own decisions. And then I'll answer the questions I can answer, but know that, in my role I have access to certain information, but not access to every level of the conversation, all the way to state and federal levels. I don't really necessarily have access to all those, but I do have a certain amount of awareness of what conversations are happening, at least with like the regional assessment meetings that we have with other district test coordinators. And also know that I don't live in a vacuum, and I deal with this all day. And my primary function is to make sure that as a publicly funded institution, we follow the rules that we are given. Now, that doesn't mean that these are the rules for perpetuity, forever, but that's what I'm presenting tonight, is kind of where we're at right now, the information we have right now. So, without further ado, I'll just kind of jump in and let you know that this presentation was developed over multiple parent information nights. I've had a few sites, and so I've structured it in kind of a question and answer format. And I know there's so much going on with this, and we have a lot of questions. But I do want to get through the presentation part, because hopefully I'll be able to answer some of the initial questions, and then we can open it up for question and answer after I'm done talking. So if you can help me with that, and then I can get through to the parts that I really want to get to too. So with that, here are the 4 big questions that I'll be looking at tonight and we'll talk about tonight. Why are we giving smarter balanced assessments? The second big question is then, what does that assessment look like? And then following from that, then what are the results going to look like? And then following from that, okay, what is a parent request for exemption? Okay? And within each of those 4 questions, I'm going to address kind of more specific questions under each of those 4 categories. So the kind of quick and dirty answer of why are we giving this test is that it's all based on the transition to Common Core standards. When we transitioned to Common Core standards in 2010 in Oregon, that also meant that we needed to eventually transition to a new test that was based on the new standards. And that's where we are. So just a little background on the Common Core standards. And I know there's a lot of information about this, about Common Core. This isn't the heart of what I'm talking about tonight, but just some background as far as how it's approached. The real thing I want to get to is the ultimate goal of the Common Core standards is to make sure that our kids are progressing toward college and career readiness. That's a very different goal than what our previous sets of standards had. And so, as I continue to talk about kind of the new test, I'm going to keep going back to that goal. Now, whether or not or how well that goal is met is a conversation for potentially other times, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. There are some differences from our old standards to the Common Core standards, and we do really see these differences in the assessment as well. But in language arts and literacy it's not just the responsibility of language arts teacher in secondary, even though in elementary you just have one teacher. But it's really about pushing literacy and literacy development into the content areas, into science, into history and social studies, into the technical subjects. And then in mathematics, there's kind of a progression from kinder through middle to high school, with the ultimate goal of trying to get our high school students into applying their mathematics knowledge into real life situations. Again, this is very different than our old standards, and so this is why we're in a situation where we have a new test coming online. The Smarter Balanced Consortium, and there's a few documents out there that I've referenced in previous talks if you're interested, as far as why Oregon decided to go with Smarter Balanced. Oregon Department of Education did put out a document as far as the kind of the reasoning and decision making behind that. I wasn't part of that, so I can't speak to that beyond what's in the document. But there are two multi-state consortia that were awarded funding, and one is Smarter Balanced, which we're a part of here at Oregon, and then there's the PARC consortium. And a lot of the media coverage of results that have come out, just to let you know, those are from PARC states, because their tests went to full administration before the Smarter Balanced one did. So, and I'll talk more about results in a little bit, but just to let you know though, if you've heard about results coming out, we haven't experienced that yet here. That's mostly from the other consortium. So just to kind of put some context to where we are this year. This work didn't just start this year. This is a full year, first full year of implementation. We've had 2 years of piloting and field testing, and prior to that there were multiple years of development. And there's a lot of questions as far as like who's working on that development. We have teachers that work in PPS that actually did write questions, and there have been teachers that have been contracted across all the member states to develop questions. And so they aren't just like statisticians sitting in a room creating questions. It was a very actually rigorous question development process. And if we have time, or if you're interested, I'm more than happy to talk about that. But know that it wasn't just like pulling stuff out of existing materials out there in the world from textbook companies or whatever. They actually did build this from scratch for this purpose. So let's talk about what the test looks like. Now I'm giving you the information as I have it from district testing coordinator point of view, where I have like the test administration manual. And I mean, despite all of the attention on this topic, I do feel kind of lucky. Very few people have like a manual that they have to follow for their job. But that's really essentially my role, is to make sure that we're following the rules as set out by the state. And so all my information is coming from that. The quick answer as far as what does it look like, our OAKS test only had multiple choice questions. And to be able to assess students' progress towards college and career readiness, just relying on that one way of measuring their progress wasn't adequate. So you see different kinds of items and different ways of assessing students' progress toward college and career readiness on this test. So I just want to give a little comparison between what we knew from OAKS and what we can expect with the Smarter Balanced test. Like I already said, multiple choice was only a kind of question on the OAKS tests. There's a rumor going around that there are no multiple choice questions on the Smarter Balanced test. That's not true. There are still some multiple choice questions, but there's also some additional types of questions, like multiple answer questions. And it's not designed to trick the kids. The way the question is worded is, which two of the following options are examples of whatever. So they know how many they're looking for. Also, the way that the student chooses the answer looks different than in a multiple choice question. It actually allows them to select more than one answer versus a multiple choice, where there's only one answer. It only allows them to select one answer. So there are some kind of built-in aids as far as how they're responding. There are some short answer where they're typing in their responses. For our older kids, we'll see like some equation editor. You won't see that at on the math 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade tests. so much. A lot of that is still kind of, selecting. You see a lot more of the constructed response where they're creating their answer at the higher grade levels in math.
So above 5th grade?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In math. In
Okay.
math, yeah. Now, Oaks had a reading test, writing test in the high school, and then a mathematics test. And so you see a little bit different structure with Smarter Balance. There's the English Language Arts, which has more parts. It has reading and writing and some more. And then there's the mathematics test. The Oaks was given and scored by the computer, totally and completely. The Smarter Balance test is given by a computer, but partially scored by humans. And I'm going to talk more about that when we talk about results. Students could take the Oaks more than once. And a lot of our kids were subjected to taking the Oaks as many as 3 times a year, year after year after year. And some of us may not be aware of that, but that was the case. There's one chance for Smarter Balanced, and so we only have to go through this once at the end of the year, because the intention is for it to be an end-of-year summative test. So there are 2 parts to the English Language Arts test and 2 parts to the mathematics test. The first part is the computer adaptive test. And there's a variety of question types. For our younger kids, probably see fewer than the range. It ranges because it's computer adaptive, just like the Oaks was. So some students are going to see fewer questions than other students until it has adequate information to give us kind of proxy a score for a student. The selected response questions will be scored by a computer. In English Language Arts, there'll be some for our 3, 4, and 5th graders. There'll be some where they have to write their answer or kind of explain a little bit, and that'll be scored by a human. So there's a second part. Sorry, I'm already trying to get ahead of myself. There's also the second part, the performance task, and this is the part that's really new. This is the really new part, and this classroom activity precedes the performance task. And the point of the classroom activity, it's a non-secure, any kids can be exposed to it. It's a 30-minute activity to build background information. So, for example, the performance task question might have to do with asking students about different ways of learning and alternative forms of education. But if that student's never learned about or doesn't really know about like a virtual classroom, that student might be at a disadvantage. So the classroom activities are designed for students to build some background knowledge. So there aren't students at a disadvantage just because they happen to know a lot about something really interesting. Another example I use is if it has to do with, performance has to do with like dinosaurs. And I never got into dinosaurs, and I'm not really understanding what it's asking. There's at least an opportunity to build some background. All the kids at 3rd grade are going to have the same classroom activity. All the kids at 4th grade are going to have the same classroom activity. But when they go in and take the performance task, which is on the computer, they'll have anywhere between 4 or 8 different actual individually administered performance tasks, and that's the questions. And there's a few kind of ramp-up questions, might be multiple choice, might be short answer, and then in English Language Arts, there's an essay, and it's an age-appropriate essay. And then for math, you have some few kind of leading up questions, and then a kind of a bigger, like how do you solve this problem question. I do have to say though, as far as performance tasks, while performance tasks are part of like the end of year summative test is new, it's not unlike our in concept, but it's not unlike in concept with our work samples. There's some similar thinking behind that, but when we're actually in the test, it'll feel different than work samples. But there's been some confusion that the performance tasks will replace the work samples. And I haven't heard anything like that coming down from ODE, so that won't be happening. The performance tasks, because of the part that they're actually, the students are writing or creating, will be scored by people. So there's been a lot of estimates, a lot of time estimates, a lot of different time discussion about how long is this going to take. So the figures on the screen are an estimate of how much time based on the field tests and the pilot tests. This is not a time limit. This is not the amount of time a student should be sitting in front of a computer taking the test in one go either. These time estimates are out of the test administration manual, and they're really toward helping us design a schedule. So for our little ones, if we want our third graders not to be in front of the computer more than 45 minutes at a time, maybe we are setting up like 30-minute or 45-minute test sessions, then we know how many to plan for most students. That's what these time estimates are for. The 30-minute classroom activity is not done on the computer, it's in the class, and it's actually kind of designed to be discussion-based. So now again though, this is not time limit. So I know that there are concerns about kids typing, and I gotta tell you, it's not just for our little ones. Our 11th graders don't know how to type either, okay? I mean, that is a major consideration, but they have as much time as they need to type in their responses. So the skills that are going to be tested are based off of the 5 claims. There's one overarching claim, and then 4 sub-claims, and these are derived from the Common Core standards. And the reason I pull this out is that this is also going to be how our scores are going to be based on. Okay, so within the English Language Arts test, we'll have there's an overall claim of getting students demonstrate their progress toward college and career readiness. And then there's the reading, writing, speaking, listening, and the research or inquiry. But I'll tell you right now that there won't be any speaking on this test this year, probably not next year. It's only listening. So there are audio clips in the tests where the student can listen to it, they can pause it, they can replay it as many times as they want. But listening will be on the test, so you can kind of like mentally scratch out speaking for this year, probably next year. I don't see them having that ready next year at all. In mathematics, I think there's some misinformation that we're not teaching our kids basic math facts anymore. That shouldn't be true, and it's certainly not true in the way the test is designed. The first claim is concepts and procedures, and that includes like basic math facts. What's newer is kind of moving into problem solving, and then getting kids past that, just applying the steps that they memorized into, well, how do I then take this and communicate to somebody how I figured out this problem? And so we've got communicative reasoning, and then also we're getting toward modeling and data analysis, which is a far larger claim as they get older. So a sample of the test, I will tell you, I'm reading, we have like district test coordinator listservs, so all of us in the region are kind of talking with each other. I've been reading some chatter on the listserv that there's some problems depending on the browser. I don't really know which browser it is, and so I'm kind of waiting on getting some word back from our fellow district test coordinators of what solutions are you finding. But I do think anyone should check out the practice tests. There are 2 options for the practice test. There's the one that's housed on the Smarter Balance website, and that's the first one. And the reason why I put both up is the first one, if you as a parent are going in and checking it out, that's a good one to check out, because when you're selecting which test you want to look at, it's more clear. And the questions are going to be the same, regardless of which one you go into. If you're looking at orienting a student into like what is it going to look like in the test, then the OAPS portal one is a better one for the student, because that's going to look just like how they're going to encounter it during testing. The questions, again, they're totally the same. It's just that when you're selecting which test you're going to practice, it's all abbreviations and acronyms, and it's a little bit more confusing. And there's more than just the Smarter Balance test on there. You also have like ELPA tests and OAPS Science tests on there. So it's a little bit harder to navigate. So kind of depending upon your purpose. If you, as an adult, you're checking it out for your own information and you want to see the structure of the questions, I suggest going to the first one. It's a little bit easier to navigate. The second one, if you're intending to show this to your student or your child and say this is what you're going to encounter during testing, and just to play with the buttons and see what does this do when I click on this button, what happens when I zoom, then I would definitely go to the second one because it's structured the way it would be when they encounter it during testing. Now, let me tell you, I'm going to break in just a moment, but I won't forget your hand. I'm encouraging everyone just to check it out. The purpose of going and checking out practice tests is not to score it and analyze it and try to infer what this, student progress might be on the final test. That's not what it's designed for. It's really designed just to play with it. What happens when I try to go to the next page but I haven't answered any questions? What happens when I, click on this? What happens when I do this? What happens when I right-click? Do I get options? Just so that they're, I just have an idea what's in there. You can also see the different kinds of item types. But I will tell you that you can find the answers to it if you do want to score it, but you have to score it on your own. Because there's, constructive response where you type out your answer. But it's really not about analyzing scores or that. It's really just to experience what they look like and how do you interact in the testing interface. So, results. Let's talk about results for a second. Right now, what we're expecting and the information that I've gotten in my role is that we're expecting an overall score for each test and then a score for each of those 4 claims. So it'll be a lot like with OAKS where you had a numerical score and then like a proficiency band score, meets, does not meet, or exceeds. So just to review, so they're there. It's the overall score and then all 4 claims for both English language arts and for mathematics. I will tell you though, not like OAKS, where when the students, right when they finished and submitted it, because it was all computer scored, the students would get a score would flash up right when they were done with OAKS. That will not happen with this test because it won't be completely scored until the other parts have been human scored. So they won't get that temporary score right when they're done submitting the test like they did with OAKS. And so we do expect scores to be available over the summer. Just to let you know kind of how it works on our end, we get data files from the state of Oregon kind of in stages. So we might have some scores as early as end of May, and then get scores through the summer. So that's why I can't give you a date because I don't have one date. We kind of get downloads through the summer months starting in late May. And it kind of depends on when your student finished the test and what was submitted and how long it takes for the human scoring to be done. Now, there's a lot of talk about what the results will be used for. Notice what I'm not saying is what the results should be used for. Please know that this is the state that we're in right now. That doesn't mean it's always going to be like this. But this is the reality we're working with right now. It's 1 gauge towards students' progress toward college and career readiness. It's 1 gauge for school and district-wide progress in Common Core standard implementation, not the only gauge. It's also, the scores and participation rates are factored in school report card calculations from the state. And any other accountability measures, it's a bit redundant, because really the accountability measures is the school report card. And results for 11th graders this year can be used for essential skills. And if you have older kids, I do have I can address questions about that too. But just to let you know, I left those, I've hidden those slides. This is also available publicly on the website, on the PPS website too. So if you guys ever want these slides. So I got to tell you that nothing has changed around what happens to student information according to the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. I have very strict rules as far as what I can and can't do even though because of my role I have access to students' information, I cannot email students' name and SSID together. I can't even report those two things together to the state when I'm reporting improprieties. Like, I get nailed for that. So just know that the rules around student information privacy haven't changed. So what Smarter Balance has released is that they have only asked for the minimal demographic information, no individual identifying information. And the purpose of having that information, it's like gender, race, ethnicity, special ed status, English learner status, and free reduced lunch status. And the reason why those demographics are requested by the consortium is to continue to test the reliability and validity across different student groups. It's not to identify individual students. This individual student data is housed at the state level, and it doesn't go beyond, it doesn't go to the federal government. It's not reported that way. States actually do all of the number crunching, and they report all those numbers to the federal government. So, parent request for exemption. I'll tell you, the parent request for exemption takes up, I talk about this at work, and then I get to go home and have these conversations. So please know I'm not living in a vacuum. I'm very well aware of what's going on. I'll just tell you though, parents and guardians may exempt a child from testing based on 2 reasons: religious or disability reasons. Those are the reasons that are given to us by the state. There's a statute there if you want to look it up. These are the only 2 reasons I can accept under current law. Know that these 2 reasons are not questioned. And also know that religious, I know this for those that are seeking a request for exemption and don't think that disability is an adequate answer, but religious beliefs goes beyond just like religion-based beliefs, but belief system, personal beliefs. And so do know that I know it's hard for some of us. I had a very lengthy conversation with an agnostic parent who had difficulty marking that, and just know that it's more than just like a religion-based belief. It's personal beliefs count for that. It is a request that is made by the parent. Nobody can do it for you, so it does need to be done by the parent, and it must be renewed every year. We need to do it before testing. We can't do like a retroactive exemption of a student that already started a test. We don't have the ability to do that. We don't have access to the student information that way. It's at the state level at that point once they've done and submitted their test. So we can't go in and take out scores. Students who do not test due to exemption are counted as non-participants. And I want to talk about this non-participant thing for a moment. Some of the background has been lost as to why this is included. The original intention to include students that don't test as non-participants and have that count against schools and districts for accountability reasons, one of the major intentions behind that was because the fear from the legislators making these rules was that schools would systematically exclude students that were expected to do poorly so that they could artificially boost their school or district ratings. That's why participation is included. The conversation has changed, right? As far as how we should or shouldn't count, or how schools and districts should be rated as far as participation is concerned. These are the current rules, but there are conversations happening at the state level, but right now, participation does count against the report card, and students that don't test due to exemption are counted as non-participants. Also, requests for exemption only apply to testing. It's come up multiple times that if my student who's like 11th grader doesn't test, then are they also exempt from like graduation requirements? That's not true. It only applies to testing that year. Okay. This is also not a new process. It's just gained a lot of attention, especially this year. Started to get some attention last year. Let me talk about the process. So it needs to be initiated by the parent because it is a parent request. And we are asking that somebody at the school, usually it's a principal, depending on some of our larger schools, it could be a vice principal. especially at secondary level, meet with or have a discussion with the parent. And I will tell you, as a district testing coordinator, I have sat in front of all the principals and said this, and every parent meeting I've said this. You know, the intention of this meeting is to make sure the interested parent has their questions answered and knows what they're filling out. So that when that form is submitted, it's complete. And we don't have to come back to you and tell you, I can't accept this. Because as a representative of a publicly funded institution bound by rules, I can only accept those that have one of those two reasons marked. I can't accept anything that says other. So that's the point of that conversation. It's just to make sure the questions are answered and that you know what you're filling out and how to fill it out. It's not to, you know, make it harder. Because what makes it harder is when I get a form that's incomplete and I can't take it. That we don't want to go down the road. So just to let you know what happens. So after it's submitted to the school, then they send me a copy. So I'm the face, goes to me, and then what happens with the form is that it goes in a file and we block that test. And the reason why we're asking for the form is to make sure that in case with high exemption, right, if there's we do have like really high exemption proportion, we have the documentation showing that this is what the parents requested. It's totally legal. We're totally covered. As a public funded institution, we're following the rules. The other thing is that we actually have to check if the student doesn't take a test that it's due to parent exemption, and that's what provides us the information that we know we're marking it correctly. Neither of those two reasons, whether it's for disability or religious reasons, ever goes past that form. It's just an exemption is an exemption. They're treated differently. And just to let you know, you don't really have to do anything with step 4, but just to know that I go in and block the test so that no student that whose parent has requested exemption is like, you know, mistakenly tested or tries to get pulled in during makeup sessions, right? Things like that. So we want to make sure we block them so we don't have to worry about it. And so with that, actually, so there is more than just me. We also have other tests that we do. This isn't the only test in the world. And so we were working with other tests as well, and there's still like 12th grade retake, OAKS, and stuff going on. But that's my contact information. Mike, works with me, and he works with like the English language proficiency assessment that our English learners take. Joe is the director of the department, and then Britt is our clerk, and so she fields a lot of questions and then kind of funnels them to who they need to go to. I can tell you, as far as exemption, I'll go back to it, I promise. That I have received, actually I can just talk at you. I've received exemptions directly to me, and I just call the school site and make sure they know that student's parent has requested exemption, so that they can plan for it. So the only thing I ask you as the person who is dealing with the paperwork and making sure that all of the bureaucratic boxes are checked, if you are interested in this, please seek that out sooner than later so that the schools can plan for our kids that won't be testing. And that we can go ahead and block the test for those kids that won't be testing. And then if you have any other questions, you know, that's all I ask is just don't wait until, you know, day of, because then that puts our teachers in kind of a weird position to try to make decisions on the fly when we can plan for it. And what we do with the kids that aren't testing. And so with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Gwen. I'll stop talking at you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will come back to your hand first once we open up to questions. And yeah.
So I am Gwen Sullivan, and I didn't come with any prepared anything. I was asked to come because I'm a parent here. And on our parent listserv, there was some information about Smarter Balance, and I just kind of piped in that, you know, as parents you have rights, and I wanted to make sure that everybody knew what your rights were, and rights about what when it comes to tests. And I think that this particular test is one that is important for you as parents to know what your kids are actually are doing. So I don't have a whole presentation for you, but I did come here. You know, as a parent, I've opted my kids out because of for the last few years. And it's not because my kids are poor test takers. It's not because I don't believe that they can achieve. It has nothing to do with that. For our family, it is something entirely different. And so when we're looking at things like Smarter Balance in particular, but also OAKS, it's because they're high-stakes tests. They are high stakes in the definition of, it defines the score. One score defines a child. It defines a school. It defines a teacher. And it's one of those things that's used in such a punitive way, or in some cases, oh, look, I'm really smart. I often tell the story about my son, who's an incredible test taker, and he did very well, but I also say, but it doesn't show how lazy he is, because my kid's smart, sure, but what's going to get him to be active and do things? So these tests don't really show the whole story. The other thing is there are things about, in the past it was multiple choice, and now it's multiple choice and other things. We know that so I'm a teacher, so yes, I'm a parent of a daughter here at Abernathy. Both my son and daughter went here. My son's over at Husford. But I also taught here. Many of you know me when I was here and started Battle of the Books. We just finished, first I know I'm singing this, so we're into finals of Battle of the Books. But the reason why I bring this up is the multitude of hats that I wear as a parent, as a teacher, as a community member. I'm from here. And I see that there are so many amazing kids that are really bright, and these types of tests don't show their knowledge. Some of them, sure, but not all of them. There are kids that are really good at listening to things. Maybe they're not, they're high in, when I was in the library, I actually secured iPods, some nanos for the library. I think in this grant I got 5 different nanos so kids could download books, because some of our really smart kids maybe struggle with reading because maybe they have dyslexia, maybe they have some reading issues, but they're really smart. That's not going to help them here. And so I just, for me as an educator as well as a parent, it's hard for me to see this one-size-fits-all place. But it's high stakes in the sense that it really is it's a score that follows your kid. It follows teachers. It follows schools. When we talk about the school report card, when over and over we hear that at this school their student achievement is this, they're really high achieving here. But what's that based on? It's based on a high stakes test. So what we also see, we see it across the district too, and this is, of course, not surprising to most of you, but you look at socioeconomic and you look at how well people score or how well our students score on tests, and they mirror each other. So this is also a test that's really punitive for kids in poverty, kids of color. Kids don't have as many opportunities. It's it really defines socioeconomic more than anything. We here at Abernathy, and this is a changing community from the time that I started with my son many years ago, but we're the middle class. We're like a middle class neighborhood. We're not high, we're not low, we're somewhere in the middle. We do pretty well because we're really active in our kids' lives. But in other places, they can't be as active, maybe because they just don't have, they have to, make ends meet. So there's a variety of reasons for our family why we don't do this, but it's also the time suck. I think the intent, and I think that Mary's right about that the intent is that we aren't trying to it's supposed to be this end of the year assessment, and really what it is because of the high stakes attached to it, that it's all about test prep, making sure the kids are ready for testing. And I'll remember that last year at a community meeting here, when we were talking about technology, parents were concerned, really concerned. They're like, how are we going to get our kids ready to do the keyboarding? We need to get our keyboarding done in the second grade for this test, right? And there's also cognitive brain development. It doesn't, I mean, it's inappropriate at that age. So, and then it makes me go back to last year as a community. And if you're kindergarten parents, you may not remember this conversation, but people who've been here for a while, for years we did Run for the Arts. And the whole run was about earning money so we could do these murals, so we could work with artists in residence. And last year we made the decision that we weren't going to do that we were going to do the tech trek, because our school was kind of the middle child, not low enough and not high enough, and so we decided we're going to do this tech trek because we didn't have enough technology. And in the past, Tammy Barron would, squirrel away her technology dollars for our Mac lab, which is barely surviving. And so we did this tech trek to get more technology, and now that is going to be used for testing, because that's what we have here. And just at Abernathy, if we were to take 30 students using the technology, it would take, for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders to get through, it would be, the district says 17.2 days of testing. So you wouldn't have, what we did the technology for wasn't about testing, it was about integrating technology into our classrooms, right? And so we know that a month is going to be gone from our kids using any of that, all of the whole school. That's if we had 30 tablets. And it goes on. And this is based on the same assumptions of how big a testing window is. The guess is, you help me with this, is it it's 7 to 8 hours, something like that they're guessing?
It depends on the grade level, yeah. So it's 7, right? Yeah, so it depends on what grade level you're looking at. So,
but it's
so you hear both tests total. But know that
7 is the lowest?
7. But know that that is not, and I will keep saying this until I'm blue in the face, it's not for misinformation, but I'm going out to the schools and working with test coordinators to make sure that they're breaking that in digestible, age-appropriate chunks. It should not be one test, start to finish, one day. That should not be done that way.
So just with the guess, thank you.
But 7 hours total?
Right, that's the estimate.
And so, but the Oaks test, the estimate was an hour and a half. And we know as educators that took well over a week to do. And part of it is because we do it over time, and some kids take longer. So when we look at an estimate like that, we know it's going to be even more. And if we do break it down, because we need to, our kids can't stay focused for that amount of time. It doesn't make sense. And it becomes even longer of when that this kind of drags on. So I absolutely have my personal bias. I mean, you hear it. But I also think you need to know as parents what it is and what it's not. So some of the things around college and career ready. So as educators, it's more than college and career ready. It's about life ready. It's about enjoying and being a citizen and learning some things that are much more important. I mean, yes, we want kids to get a great education, so if they choose to go to college, they can go to anyone they want to, that they are career, they can think about some of the amazing kids that at Benson that are it's all, project-based learning, and they're getting right into careers, and their hearts are into it because they're learning so much. It's just a different way. But it's more than just college career. It's about being life ready, and what does that mean? And so as teachers, we strongly advocate for making sure that we're teaching kids to be critical thinkers. that they know how to problem solve, and they know how to collaborate with each other to figure out some of those problems that we may not know. So there's a variety of things, and this doesn't do it. So my other hat is that I'm the president of the Teachers Union, and the thing that we hear over and over is, oh, you're just against this. You don't want any accountability for the kids. And that couldn't be farther than the truth. We fight against things that we know are wrong, but we also fight for things as well. We have recently, last week we were in New York. They are exempt from these high stakes tests. They have 38 schools in New York City, public schools. It's called the New York Consortium of Schools, and their assessments are unbelievable. Seeing these kids, it's like they're writing papers, and they're working in small groups. They're having to defend their work, but they're also getting all of the training at the same time. They're not, you look at, there's research that they get to do. Who's teaching our kids research right now? Do you think the classroom teachers? Well, maybe, but as a person who is a media specialist, my job when I was teaching middle school was I did technology integration, and we taught kids how to research, knowing what a Google search actually is, that it's a popularity contest. It's not about, if you put one word in. I mean, there's so much more. Our kids don't know that. They just don't know that. So there's many things that need to be taught, and I think that with educators and parents, we can come up with a better plan, a better way to assess our kids. When I see a score, it doesn't mean anything to me. It's really when I talk to the teacher, and those report cards, personally, I can't stand those report cards. They don't really say anything. But it's when I get the opportunity to talk with the teachers, how's my kid doing? What's happening here? That's what makes the biggest difference. So I just kind of jot down a few things. The idea of that this consortium was awarded money from the feds. There are lawsuits around this because of, and we don't know what's going to happen. It could be clean. But the fact that it's only 2 tests that are awarded these contracts is a big deal. That it's more of a who benefits from this, and who are these people that put out these tests. There's a lot of money to be made. The other is the idea that the questions on this were developed from teachers. We had heard that there were teachers that were asked whether or not they were incorporated as a different question in and of itself. In the summertime, our school board actually did something right. They put forward this resolution that said until such time that the Smarter Balance assessment is considered valid, reliable, and free from cultural, linguistic, and socioeconomic bias, then we shouldn't be implementing this test, right? That was important because we're still waiting for the validity report about this. When they took the practice test, they were supposed to give our district the validity report in December. It's February, and we haven't heard anything. I mean, we've been trying to check in on this. What's the validity report? So it's like our kids are being used as guinea pigs. And there is a better way. The scored by humans, that was something that we, part of it being scored by humans, we asked about that at one of our Department of Ed meetings, and basically the corporation, Smarter Balance, they hire not necessarily educators to score. It's they hire people maybe $10 an hour to, they give them, here's the criteria. So there are humans, but they aren't necessarily educators or retired educators that are scoring them. I'm not saying that they couldn't hire an educator, but we know in other places that's exactly what these corporations are doing. And then, and I think the idea about the essential skills at the high school, I think that's one to bring up, because if kids have already passed this at the high school, they shouldn't have to take it again. This is only a way that if they haven't passed their essential skills, this is an opportunity that they could use to do that. But there are also other ways to get their essential skills. And then
put up a slide.
Okay.
That
And
I
then
had hidden for anybody that has older kids.
and then the other one about counting against you. That's the thing that we hear over and over, that this is going to count against our school. Yeah, it counts against our school for participation. That's true. You may have heard that there are other schools in our district that already had non-participation against them because their parents opted their kids out. And that it wouldn't bring us to a point. It's the state report card. But we know at this point, what we do know, this is from the superintendent of the state, so 60 to 70% of our students are supposed to fail this test. 60 to 70% are supposed to fail the test. That to me means that 60 to 70%, that would bring them down even more in the state report card. So I'd rather take the non-participation than something that doesn't make sense. And I guess, I'm here to ask, I'm like you, I'm a parent just trying to find, I know far too much now about this. But, I want to be able to answer questions, but there's a couple of things that have come up. One, no teacher or administrator for that matter would ever knowingly give our kids a test that we know that 60 to 70% of them will fail. We would never do that, but we are put in a bind because there is the ethical educator in our licensure. If we don't follow the state rules, then they can pull our teaching license. And so we have to follow these rules. And they muzzle, if you talk to your teachers, the reason why they haven't talked to you about it is because they can't. Unless you ask them about it. That's the difference. So it's a weird situation. You would think, why can't we find out about this from our teacher? We respect them. We want to know. They've been muzzled unless you ask. So that's the other part of it. And so much more I could tell you, but I won't. I think that you guys probably have a slew of questions. And I'm not an expert about, but I know a lot, is what I can say.
So our first question is right here.
Let's get the claims. With the English language arts, there was writing, reading, language speaking. Oh, sorry, speaking, listening, and then, as I recall, it used to be language, and I saw it change on that board. It was actually inquiry and research.
That's the fourth claim.
It used to be language, though, right?
Well, the way the Common Core standards are organized, there's a language kind of grouping. The way they've done it when they built these tests, they've grouped all the Common Core standards under those 4 categories.
Right. So language is one of them. I was wondering why. When I saw that slide, it said, if you can go back to the slide, it said inquiry.
Yeah, and this is the way that it's designed for the test as it stands today.
Okay.
I know that it's gone through different iterations and there's kind of been information put out at different points, but this is where it stands now. Or these are the 4 claims. But language is a category in the Common Core state standards. So I know that probably in an early iteration that might have been released, but this is how it stands now.
Okay.
And
then the one that they're actually going to be measuring is reading, writing, listening, and then research.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Before we continue on, I just want to point out that one of our school board members is here tonight. Director Steve Buell's in the back, so I want to say thank you for being here. Strong advocate on making sure that resolution passed.
Do you want some moderate questions, or are you guys comfortable?
We could call on people. I don't know everybody's name, but
We can call, yeah, we'll just kind of make our way, because I saw hands come all up at once, so I'll just kind of start that there. Yes.
When do they start a prep for this, for the kids?
it's already started.
It's already started.
So 25 to 30% of the time that in a whole year is dedicated to test prep.
Okay.
So, and I'll tell you from my perspective, the only preparation that I've been telling the test coordinators that anybody should be doing is getting and playing with the practice test to know what the item types are, like what I've talked to you today. So beyond the standard instruction, it shouldn't be beyond, you know, standard instruction should be what's preparing the kids. That's what it should be.
And if you're opting out, what are those kids doing?
During that time period, I think that's the reason why, and I would say the district's position of if you're going to opt out, do it early, because then it gives a lot of time for people to figure out, teachers to figure out what to do during that time. I know that for the last couple of years, you know, my son did a research project in his class, and then they ended up doing that research project later, and he's like, Mom, I'm 2 weeks ahead of everybody. And I was thinking, oh no, they're 2 weeks behind, just thinking of how much time that took. But anyway, there's a variety of things, and because like with Penny, she had Lisa Kane, and Lisa Kane gets it, and she was like, we'll do an alternative, you know, assessment that's actually more meaningful. So it just, the more time you have, the more that teachers can do.
More teachers
It's
can.
just upsetting if it's their last year here, and it's like how much time is being spent on this, you know, for me.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In purple.
So how does it get reflected in the report card? Is it just combined with like meeting or not meeting or all those little dashes and pluses, or is it kind of separate, like, this is what they did on the test and this is how they're doing in class and all the other stuff?
They don't, the student's report card is the report card. It's totally separate.
Right.
And then they'll, I don't know if you remember, like in the summertime, you get like your child got blah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You'll still get that
Okay, so
notification.
it's not reflected on their.
Not on the individual student report card. I think we've talked a lot about report cards. We're really talking about the school report card, not an individual student report card. So individual student report cards aren't planned to change, as far as I know.
No, not at all.
Just because of a new test, because the scores will be treated the same as Oaks were.
But this score is reported to hospital or the middle school they go to. If you're saying the score follows the student, so it is.
It's in their like their student record, just as like the Oaks scores
And how
were
are
in the record.
teachers reflecting on that? Like, what do teachers think when they see that somebody got a really low score on the smart balance?
Well, and you know what, and that, how these scores are used, is the big question, and that's, I think, one of the big reasons why we have this assessment. Hopefully we address it in an assessment committee, that we're trying to build a better system across so that we use the scores appropriately. I think I think a lot of tension has been placed on this particular test, and it's trying to be used in ways that probably shouldn't be. So, but it's not going to be used, I know it's not going to be used for holding kids back. And it shouldn't be used that way. That's not what it's designed for.
Will it be used for placement in middle school? I mean, do you know how it's going to be used?
No, not for that. We actually, so
No, it won't be used for placement.
yeah, so the districts have it in an assessment committee to look at all the different assessments, as well as a better way of assessments, and there's some hope there, I'd say. But no, it's not to be used for placement, like for compacted math or anything.
No.
So at
And it
this
shouldn't
point, we
be
don't
used
know
that
how
way.
the scores will be used. Okay.
Well, we
Well-
do know they're going to be used at the state level for generating
Okay.
scores.
Local,
Determining
we
if
don't
you're
know.
a good school or a
Okay.
Right. It's this, and we have to remember that we got to that this end of year summative test it doesn't serve every master, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily to place kids into all these programs. It shouldn't be used that way.
Okay.
But as we go year on year on year, unlike the Oaks test, this one was designed with the intention to look at student growth over year on year on year. But you know, we'll see how that comes, because you know, you need multiple years to be able to kind of see that come to light.
I'm gonna put these forms for anybody that has to leave early. If you know that you're thinking about it or whatever, these are just the opt-out forms. Okay, thanks.
So right behind the
So I have 3 questions. First, will it be used to segregate by teacher for teacher evaluation? Second, why don't you just do a random sample of the kids so not every kid has to take it, except of course the essential ones maybe for high school? And 3, why is the elementary school hours about the same as middle school and high school? Why is it about half as long?
So as far as I'm going to go backwards. The timing, that was really determined by the design of the test. I wasn't in on the design of the test. So as far as the thinking behind that, I think we'd have to look at whatever has been put out. As far as, remind me of your second question.
Random sampling.
Oh, the random sampling. We've actually talked about this, so that came up today. Right now, that's not the way it's designed by the state, because of, if we go back to the original intention of having the statewide tests was to get a measure of all of the kids, and they didn't want to have any kids excluded so that we didn't have, you know, kind of messing with the school scores, right? So we have that 95.5% participation expectation. That's the way this was designed. If, you know, NAEP is done as random sampling, so, but it has a slightly different purpose. So I just know that this is where we're standing now, but do know that the conversations about that are happening. That is where we stand now. And then your first question.
The last one, yeah, is the teacher evaluation. So will the scores be grouped by teacher and then they get paid or promoted based on student scores?
So, no, so there's many things are happening actually right now. I mean, there's so much going on, it's like, it's the hotbed of craziness. But, to get a waiver from No Child Left Behind, the Obama administration and Arne Duncan said you must tie teacher evaluation to student test scores. And so Oregon put together something where they did this matrix of hodgepodge of stuff, and there is student test score, and I mean, it's in there. So it's not about getting paid, it's about being rated based on your students' test scores. So, you know, having taught at West Sylvan for 13 years, high SES, my students came in the 99th percentile. So I would be doing pretty well. But if I was working in a higher poverty area, I would not be doing as well. So yes, there is a portion, it's a small portion, but it's still there and it's wrong. And then the whole thing around random sampling, all of these things are ideas that, you know, we, parents and teachers are saying, well, to take the high stakes out of it, just do a random. I mean, that's how Oaks was designed. It was just like a temperature check until it turned into something else. So good question.
And I'll tell you too, and as far as conversations I've been privy to as a district test coordinator with, in the region, that's a very hot topic as far as how this is used. It's written in and there's expectations for it to be delivered, but they're looking at, our most recent conversation has been around using the student growth percentile and not just their like 99th percentile, right? So it's not just, it doesn't matter wherever the student was the previous year, how much they've grown into the next year. But again, you need 2 years of scores for that, right? There's the other can of worms that gets open. And it's 5% of evaluation right now. I think it's overall our teachers get evaluation. Is that right? Is that what you said?
We actually,
There's still a negotiation.
yeah, we don't agree to that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is I just said that there's lots going on right now. Even today, you know, that the chief education officer says that Oregon schools deserve a 1 year reprieve from being rated according to test scores. So part of it is like there's such a recognition of all this craziness that's going on that they're trying to slow it down or stop it without and still wanting to get their waiver. It's like it's so political. It's more political than it is anything else. But it's interesting. Day by day, something else comes out.
So just as a point of clarification, we were told that our child's placement in compacted math or not was based on standardized tests last year.
Right.
Test.
So they were wrong, and you should have said something about that.
You know, I did. So, I mean, just as an example of how that's being used.
Inappropriate.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and there is, at Oxford, I know they use car notes.
Car,
Absolutely. But notes was also a consideration, my daughter did the compact based on
So we actually talked about this.
It just makes sense to the
So this is one of the conversations we had because I was in the middle school group today in this assessment committee, and we were looking at all the different assessments and what they do, and we were looking at the CAR test, and everybody that was there was like, each one of these is just not the whole, either you're going to get in for this or that it is a variety of things. And so they talked about how teacher recommendation as well. I think so those are conversations that we might need to have at Oxford with the Oxford administration. That needs to change. Hold me.
In front row, and I'll come back to you.
So, using them.
This is Grace.
Okay. So I have taken the practice test, and I really struggled just to understand the instructions in the English language arts section after rereading them many times and having the benefit of a master's degree. So I wonder if you can say a little bit about how the validity of the test is assessed and what the process is for improving the test going forward if there's a hope that we might get to something better in the future.
Sure, I can tell you what I know. Is that the results from the pilot and field tests are still being analyzed, and I haven't seen any results either. So they're still being analyzed for testing the items. As far as, so I don't know if I can speak to something, haven't seen any product of like a reliability or validity study, but what you were talking about asking for, we haven't gotten that yet from the consortium. So I do know, though, from what I have had access to and have read, is that there is definitely intention to take each year's results, just as the OAPS had questions kind of cycling through year on year, that if the questions weren't performing well, they'd get pulled from the test and new ones would get replaced, that there are plans for that, but we need time to see that. So,
But will they give the test without having the results analyzed, without this validity thing? I mean, will we still take the test? Will we still take the test if we don't have these analyzed results?
we have the timelines that we're expected to adhere to as a public institution, and so that's where we're sitting now. So yeah. We have no control over that.
I would defend Mary in the sense that I think that the district folks are put into this position of just compliance. And then when the state's saying, you know, you got to do this without these things, the rest of us can say, are you kidding? You know, I mean, but we have to be educated about it, and that's where I think is the most important thing. And if we don't have a validity report, it seems ludicrous that we would be going forward with it.
You're here.
You know, but the district has a compliance.
So yeah,
I'm not mad at you. I was just happy.
No, and I know that this is what a parent very so kindly last week said. No, it's personal. I totally get that. Yeah. Because like I want what's best for our kids too. Right. That's why I'm working with schools to let's build a schedule that makes more sense. Right. Because it's a lot of moving pieces. But we have to adhere to the rules that have been handed to us, you know, so that we're covered. And that's why, you know, when I've talked to any parent about like exemption, I just have to make sure that the forms are correctly filled out so I can accept it, no questions asked, and then we have that documentation, and there are avenues to Department of Education, you know, for ODE, for feedback, as far as like what is and isn't allowed during the tests and things like that. There are avenues for that kind of feedback where that change can happen. So I'm concerned about time. So I don't know when we're supposed to end, Heidi. Okay, all right. And I promise I can do your hand.
I want to be quick, because I think it's just for you, Mary, I know Glenn's perspective, but as a parent, what do you think the benefits of taking the Smarter Balance test are if you're a parent of a kid taking that test? What are the benefits?
Sure.
Like, what
So,
might you get from that?
First things first, as we're placing way too much emphasis on it, there is a certain amount of having that knowledge at this point of this first year, and to see next year what kind of growth from that one measure could be seen, right? Because as we move toward a growth model, a individual student growth model, without last year's scores, you can't have a growth ranking, right? You can't have a growth percentile. So there's benefit in that, but it's only one measure of that. The other thing too is that as we progress, as our students progress through toward being in high school, when there are other tests they'll be taking, like the SAT, that does have an on-demand right essay, it gives them some experience in what does it mean to be given this totally unknown, you know, prompt and right on the spot have to produce writing. There is a certain amount of skill set to practice as they grow through. But ultimately,
70% or it's designed where 70% will fail. Will I get like a does not meet this year? And is it possible for me to get a does not meet this year with not a lot of detailed information, and then it's like does not meet in reading or language arts and does not meet in math, and then in 7th or 6th grade does not meet in either one? Like where they improved even if they didn't meet goals, or would it just give me a does not meet?
So, and this is where we kind of have value, okay, where my information shows that we're going toward this other measure in addition to the raw score and the meet or doesn't meet, but the student growth percentile in addition to that. So regardless of where they were last year, of all the kids that performed the same way, the same score that they did, how well did they progress on the next year's test? We won't see those though for, you know, at least till next year, right?
But even if they would get that 50% growth, whether they meet or exceed.
And I do, you know, from an assessment point of view, it's definitely the way of the future. I mean, this is better for kids, so we can see progress in this one measure instead of just having this discrete end of year score that doesn't mean anything. You can't compare it year on year, right? I do think it's in the right direction, but we have to have time, right, to see that come to fruition, because we have to have multiple years to compare of an individual student's score.
So people don't hold their hands up for a long time. I have green in front, I have Amy, I have purple, sorry, straight here, and back, and gentleman right here in front. Aye. So my question then, if I can just get quick for time. So I heard you say that students will have as much time as they need. Like, how is that possible? Like, I don't understand logistically how, you know, I know that Dr. McClellan talks about that testing is going to happen before spring break, and I don't know how that's possible. Like, I'm just picturing my teacher with 30 kids and one that's done in 45 minutes and one that's done in 3 hours.
Sure.
Like, what the heck?
I know, totally. No, that's where the reality sets in, that we have all these like nice figures and suggestions.
We don't live in it.
And so, you know, there's, you know, so when I'm working with schools building their schedules, there's, you know, we're trying to build like so many individual sessions, right? So when on Monday it's for like 45 minutes, and then Tuesday for like 45 minutes. So they're not doing testing all day, right? Because that's not good for it. And then also building in kind of make-up sessions where the kids then could be brought into the lab individually
instead of music or instead of
And that's how,
Actual classroom.
right, and that's how the different schools are managing that differently. But that's how that's done in reality, and,
No, that doesn't make any sense to me, I'm sorry.
Right.
It's done in reality.
well, I mean, it's like, it's not everybody's sitting in a lab for 1 or 2 students out of the 30
Oh, I thought
class.
you meant like in real life, I'm like, no. That's the way it works in testing. Got it. I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in terms of, you're going to collect test scores, but if we're going to submit our kids to 7 hours of testing, are we gathering data that identifies where we need to be supporting kids more or less? Because it seems like that much information, that much data, you should be able to drill down. I want to know more than after 7 hours of testing, my kid passed or failed or met or whatever. It's like, is there anything that provides any more detail to their teachers the subsequent year saying this student needs more support in X, Y, Z? Or as a whole, as a school, we haven't done a good job in this area. Is there any analysis to really support the outcome of the kids, or is it really just more about a score towards preparedness for college?
So there won't be more information past the claim level as far as all the information I've been privy to as far as scores that we're going to get. We're not going to get anything past the claim level. So those 4 claims, like it's, so in past years, past tests, there was this kind of, you can almost see like by cluster of standard, right? This is the finest detail that this test is designed to produce. That's what I mean by claim level.
We actually put together something for our teachers. Does it provide meaningful feedback to students? No. Does it provide meaningful feedback to teachers? No. Does it provide meaningful feedback to parents? No. Is it a valid measure of student learning? No. I mean, this was to our own teachers, just, and we're really encouraging, if you're a teacher and you have kids in public schools, you need to lead by example and knock your kids out. And that's what this was. It brought it just because really the only thing it does do is a measure of socioeconomic. Purple, straight here and back, this Jim's and Pat, because the guy in glasses left.
My question is,
Yeah.
my question is, I've heard, you can mention that this is an end-of-year test, but I've been hearing it's going to start in March. I've heard it's going to have to take March through May for the schools to get all the kids to it, but aren't they missing like 2 months of learning that they're going to get tested on? Like, how do you test, how's the test developed to go up to February and not like March through June?
So the window that's testing is allowed to happen on the school, this 3rd through 5th grade, it does open March 10th. But there are a few schools that I know, because I've only seen so many schedules, because the schedules are determined at the school level, are really starting right away. So it really depends on what computer labs are available and how to move the kids through to cover all of the testing that makes sense.
So isn't that going to contribute to the failure rate, because some kids are taking it before they're ready to even learn topics?
It's the nature of this beast in some ways. But then again, you also have to remember that we had kids starting OAKS testing before Christmas before. Their first attempt used to happen before Christmas, right? So I mean,
Because of the high stakes.
and they were taking it as many as 3 times, and that hour and a half started adding up, Doing it once, while March is early, it's, 66% of the year or later, through to the end of the year, that allows schools enough time to be able to work all their, move all the kids through the labs they have, their facilities, because, we don't have like, a 1-to-1 student computer ratio, right? Otherwise, we'd all be testing the last 2 weeks of school. But yeah, it's not the perfect world, absolutely. But I see some improvements upon what we had before when we started testing before winter break.
I think I can hear this a little bit, because I was later.
Yeah. Yeah, straight here. All right.
So my question sort of speaks to the whole progression, watching our kids progress every year with the tests. I grew up here and I was CAT tested, and my teacher, my 6th grade teacher, taught to the test, and I remember him saying out loud, "I'm teaching to this test," and I scored off the charts, and TAG wanted me for math, and I was like, I am not TAG for math. And so then I was put in advanced classes. It wasn't until my freshman year in high school that the teachers were finally like, "You're a regular math student, you're not an advanced math student," based on that test. So I guess with that little story, I'm concerned that we're looking for this progression when really our kids are learning to be better at that specific testing, like this is how the test works. So from 3rd grade they might do poorly, but by 7th grade they get how it works, so they do a little better. Or maybe the teacher was better at teaching to the test or more devoted to teaching to the test. So I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but I just don't see how we can really say that we're going to see some great progression in our students using this concept.
So there's like we tie money for our school, and then what are the real actual repercussions for a bunch of smart kids opt out? Abernathy or?
Really, it's back to what she was saying around the participation. So the school is deemed for participation, and it's just when they do a school report card, it's a variety of things. Predominantly, though, it is that how a school does on test scores, like how they rank. But then, like Sunnyside, for example, they had a number of their parents opt their students out, and they were deemed for participation, and they went from I don't know the exact rating, but from like a
outstanding
to a
average or something.
No, that still above average or whatever. Yeah. But I think it's important. So that's it's more of that than I mean it's not going to be, it's not money related. It's one of those things, like I was talking to the principal over at Sunnyside today. She's like, when people come to visit our school, she's like, they say, well, why is your school of this? And she says, because our parents don't believe in these tests. And that's the only reason why. And so she has to actually say why that's the difference.
So this continues to come up time and time again, and I just want to make sure that also what is shared, that it's not really a simple answer as to what happens at all schools, because it depends on what priority level they are, how many years they've already been at that priority level, and it does have implications for how funding is structured. So anyone's saying the simple answer of it does have to do with money or it doesn't have to do with money, it's far more nuanced than that.
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so.
Can you lose Title I funding for it, so for instance?
Well, it's not losing Title I funding. It's about, and there was actually a really good email this week to somebody that works with finances. I don't work with finances directly. I have just a story there. Make sure we follow the rules. But what I do know is that depending upon how many years you've been on a certain priority status, it determines what rules you do and do not have to adhere to show that you're making efforts, right? And funneling money into areas that show that you're making efforts toward improving student improvement. So, or student performance and student achievement. So to say like what's really going to happen, it's got to look like an individual school basis and what's the demographic makeup. If these kids opt out, those kids opt out, it's not that clean. Just because the way the school report cards and the school ratings are used in working with, making the decisions at the state level, it's more complicated than it does or doesn't. So, but I strongly urge you guys to contact our financial department, that works with us directly, or talk to the schools.
What she's talking about, though, is priority and focus schools, which are schools, predominantly they're black and brown schools, that have done poor for a number of years on their tests. And so because of that, the state, under No Child Left Behind, has considered them failing schools. And so in those schools, when there is an opt-out movement, then it hits them, has the potential to hit them harder. And there is the potential for the state to say, well, we're going to come and take, come in there. But that's where some of that comes in, and there's a bigger conversation about those schools compared to others. Pat, right here, and then Charlie.
You said that you had made a brief comment about the contracts being awarded for testing and money involved. Can you expand on that as well?
No, actually, one of the teacher advocates who's really a researcher found out who's making all the money in Smarter Balance, where it comes from. I could get that to you, but what it said basically is like the CEO of that company is making, it's millions and millions of dollars compared to what the rest of, it's money making. I will, if you want to give me your address, email address, I'll forward you the article. It was him, yesterday gave all of this information about where it's about money. Okay, Shari, and then.
So I have a concern if they have to take it in 11th grade, for like what you mentioned before, that they're not practiced on being slick with this test. I went to a school in Canada that did not cater at all to standardized testing, but then I wanted to go to college here, so I had to do the SATs and all that, and I sucked. And I was a really good student, and I did really well in college, and the SAT didn't reflect anything. So I'm like, I don't want to have my child not do well on this in 11th grade if she has to do it to graduate, and then if it goes to colleges and they see this score. But I don't also want to subject her to doing this test from 3rd grade up, just so that she knows how to take this test.
So that's a great question. It's one of those things, these scores don't go to, this isn't to the college.
Yeah, they don't, they just like they didn't get those scores.
Yeah, they don't get that, and your kid doesn't have to take it at this point at the 11th grade. There are work samples they can do instead. And remember I said there's a lot of stuff that's brewing right now. It's like every day there's something else. There's a possibility that here in Portland we can actually do what we're known for as being a little unique in a positive way, we have the potential to actually develop some meaningful assessments, and that be in lieu of this test. And it's not a pipe dream. It's the first time that I actually feel like there's hope in that the actual assessment goes along with teaching and learning for the first time.
And the more opting out is done, is that going to push that movement more? Is that your belief or hope?
Well, my belief is that, and we see it in New York, where thousands and thousands of parents have opted out. They say if you don't feed the monster, it dies, right? And so part of it is, it's a two-part thing. As parents, you have to, one, decide what's best for your kid. And then two, is there's a political, civil disobedience sort of position. I think a lot of people are like, this is crazy. So, you're gonna have to figure that out. And unfortunately, it's got to be from the ground up. People in positions of power aren't gonna make the changes. It's gonna be the people that force the changes.
So I wanted to add something with the Hosford conversation about math, because I actually had a teacher from Hosford tell me that if you opted out of the test, you would not be able to be even considered for the compact math.
So after this meeting, you need to tell me who that teacher is, because I need to have a conversation with them.
Well, is that true or not true?
No.
As the district test coordinator, that shouldn't be used that way.
She's saying as the district test coordinator, it shouldn't be like that either.
But is Foster maybe not?
Maybe they didn't get the memo or something, I don't know. So we'll have a conversation with them.
So I just want you guys something though, as far as as a present corporate teacher and sitting in this chair, I just ask that just please understand the hard position that our administrators and our teachers are being placed in. I mean, I can sit up here and take the heat, and it's not personal. I mean, no, we're just trying to do the best we can. Just help us prepare, and you know, being dramatic about requesting an exemption by, you know, keeping your kids home or having, like, it doesn't help. And so just, you know, it's still focusing against by doing the form and going through the process. And if I could say that, like, that's all I ask, you know, so that to help us kind of through this transition that is very difficult.
So I've got Amy.
I just really thank you both for being here and taking time out to do this. If validity hasn't been proven and the school board has issued a statement as of last summer, why isn't there an option on the table right now to just opt out as a district?
That's a great statement. That's a statement. I actually confronted Nancy Golden personally and said, because they've made these achievement compacts and we're supposed to set these targets and it's supposed to be about smart balance assessment, these targets, and we have no idea anything about them. They've never even taken the tests. And so our achievement compacts that are made up of educators and administrators unanimously voted not to set targets. But then the state said, you have to. So here's a little twist in there, is that, so that's when I said to Nancy Golden, you know, go ahead and violate our equity policy. Go ahead and do things, you know, that we know are not in the best interest of kids, but be on your back, not on ours. But then the school board got a little creative, second time in I don't know how long. But, sorry, sweetie, just a little bit. But what it was is they said, okay, we'll set the targets. We think that all our 100% of our students will will meet, because it was so ludicrous that they were forcing us to do it in the first place. So it's the state at that point that I mean, a lot of times we like to blame the district for a lot of things, and there's sure a lot of things to blame them for, but in this case, this is a state and federal push.
So there's not an option for Portland to opt out this year?
No, there is not. I will
Unless the parents do it in droves.
The option is through the parent request for exemption. You have 2 reasons that I can accept. That is the process we have now on the table.
Okay, right here.
Why those 60 to 70%?
When it was first brought out, so it's the way that it's designed, you know, so it's the bell, but it's harder. It's much harder, but it's different. It's skills that they haven't even had before. But even it came from the superintendent of the state that said yes, 60 to 70%.
They created it with that in mind.
I don't know who the people are, I just know that that's what, and other people have taken smart balance assessment in the country. And the failure rate is a modest trial. And the CART test, which is the other one, that one is even bigger, and the product placement in the tests, and that was another question I had for you. If you know I've seen no evidence of that one.
I got my question answered.
Okay, and then this test right here in the back,
Yeah, can I just follow up on this pass-fail thing? I'm still totally baffled because I don't understand. Who decides? Is it smart balance? Who's deciding to pass-fail mark? And what is it based on? Is it based on the Common Core standards? What is it? What is pass-fail? I don't.
So the performance bands have been determined off of the existing pilot and field testing at the consortium level. And there is a document that was released not too long ago that explains this. And that's where that kind of pass-fail line is drawn. But for those of us, one thing that I might encourage you to may not have heard about is that it's not just about that pass-fail, especially for our 11th graders. ODE is going to calculate what an equivalent score from OATS was for passing to what that number would be in smarter balance. So it's not going to be quite as clean, especially for our current and near future 11th graders for just pass fail. There's going to be a target score somewhere in there. As far as how it's calculated, we can, I think, point you in the direction of like how they calculated it, but it was calculated at the consortium level.
But is that based on what metrics? I mean, is it based on expectations?
They can't do it. They say they're doing it,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
So there's no define, you can't go online and say, okay,
People
my
like
kid,
people
is.
do that, you can't
No, you can't.
different tests run different things. You can't, but they're gonna do it anyhow, but they're doing things down in the state now that you just can't do it.
That's right. Okay, right up front.
Who's administering tests? Is someone coming into it, or is our teachers taking their time out of their day to spend doing this test?
It's teachers. Some schools that have a counselor or administrator that's also a testing coordinator. Some of them are doing the test administration. But mostly it's teachers, just as the Oaks was done.
So, and even today, the principal from Sunnyside said, I can't believe that the next, I have to spend 4 hours of professional development on test prep for our teachers. So they know how to administer this test. They just, that's what they have to do. So yeah, it's the teachers. Which is, it's hard as teachers. Remember I said their mouth is closed. When they see the struggle with kids, it feels almost abusive when, you know, some of our kids would struggle with that. Actually, one of our representatives, Lou Frederick, said that this test is almost like child abuse. I mean, he just said this 2 weeks ago. So it's very difficult. Yeah.
I have a friend who's a teacher at PTS grade, and she said that their teachers are hoping that the parents who opt out will just keep their kids home. So what should we, if we decide to opt out, what can we expect that our kids should be doing during these hours that their classmates are?
That's a great question. We've actually been asking the district this for a couple of years because we know that the movement around opt-out is growing, and that we want to make sure that there are meaningful things happening in the schools. And so one, as Mary said earlier, the earlier that we know about it, the more teachers can plan. And then there's a whole group of educators that are coming up with alternative activities that for different grade levels. It's all of these library reading specialists that they're creating web quests, you know, for kids to go on so they can get on the computer that they're actually learning. Huh?
Well, it's the whole class, so there could be
With their class, if they're doing the test. It's one class. Some of them are like research projects, but really specific ones where teachers are going to help. There's a variety of different things. But we need to help teachers, help guide them on alternative things that they can do. Yeah, don't keep them home.
It's not just one day, so
yeah.
you know, keep them home.
No, definitely. Send them to school and help with that.
We've got kids taking tests and kids who aren't.
Yeah, we just need to spread the word and talk to as many people that are not here, just about what's happening. And then for the ones that continue to do it, oh yeah, I know. But I think that I know that there are many alternative things that teachers will do with kids. And that's on there in the orange.
Oh, thanks. So 2 questions. One is on the child, you know, the anxiety or the, you know, feelings that the students will have because 60 or 70% will fail the test. What is the equivalent failure rate of Oaks? Is that a dramatic change such that?
Yeah, it's huge.
Okay, so that to me signals not a good thing for kids to feel that frustration. And that goes along with my second question about the validity. So the district is obligated under the pressure or the obligation of the state that you have to administer the test even though the validity results haven't been returned. So there's no contingency. Like if the validity doesn't come, you still have to administer it. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that makes, to me, as a trained, you know, economist, that makes no sense. That you would administer a test that doesn't have validity. I don't know if that's.
I agree with you.
No, it's not.
I'll follow up on what Melissa said. As it drives me insane, the 70%. because I had a child in 3rd grade who took the OBS test and was 1 point below the math meeting. And she has ever since felt like I am bad at math. I'm horrible at math. Ever since then, on her student grades, she succeeds on math, but she thinks she sucks at math. And I blame that test. So I'm just like, as a parent saying, we talk about, oh, it's high stakes. What does that mean? For me, that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And that's why I don't support it.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
I don't see how that contributes to college and career readiness. That is the
Self-esteem.
destruction
That's
of college and
self-esteem.
career readiness.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and as well, I'm going to give you a piece of hope on our district assessment committee. One of the experts that they have brought in, that they have hired to work with us, he is all about that. He's like, you don't test kids, and so they feel like they're failures, and then you do it again and again and again. He's like, no. So we're at an interesting spot, and as you said, that we're right around the corner. What are we going to do, right? Well, hopefully, as parents and teachers come together, let's think of some really good things that we can do with our kids. Especially, we can use the tech track money for what it was intended for in the first place. I don't know.
If you talk about what do you expect, I mean, if you send your letter, do you expect some kind of, somebody to say, hey, you got your letter, or
So that's actually why we're asking for that conversation to happen at the school site, so that you have that contact with at the school site. And then once they take that form, you can attach the letter. I just need the form, and then that gets sent to us, and then you're sent to them. That's why we're asking for that conversation, so you have that assurance that it's going to proceed. I've received a couple in the mail directly from the parents. I have no other way of getting in contact with these people. There's so little information on the form that mail them directly. That's why we're asking for that conversation to happen with somebody on the system.
I just, as a parent, I just emailed the teacher and the principal information, and they just said, okay, thank you. I bet the district probably wouldn't I think that's kind of.
I'll tell you that that's hardly ever been tracked before now. I mean, it's never been such a huge issue. But, in anticipating more, that's why we're just trying to follow the policies so that we can make sure that the tests are blocked and things are done correctly on our end, so we're covered as an institution.
Can Joe Suggs get us that number? The opt-out percentage by school?
We can ask. I think that's
Okay.
I do want to thank you guys for being here as fellow parents. It's kind of a weird position for me to be in, but I also feel pretty honored that it's like, okay, I'm on friends, because it's a weird thing to talk about, where I feel like I'm selling this to you, but I think it's important that you just know about it, and then you can decide what you want.